Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our Towel Day celebration, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. This is our third and fourth in the series. We started it a few years ago. We've done we've done May the Fourth Be With You for Star Wars. We did George Jetson's birthday. I believe we did one other that I can't recall at the moment, but believe me, it's there. We This was so well received. We've made it a yearly event. So I'm going to mention it now and then bring it up again later. If you have ideas for additional days or subjects you'd like us to do something about, that please mention it. Put it in the chat. It's a great idea. You know, some people have suggested that we should do May the 6th for like the Sith, May the 6th. So we have the dark side from Star Wars. We've also talked about things like Pi Day. It's a little crowded, but it's always a lot of fun. We could do it, not actually on the day, another day, but we can also do Avogadro's Day, right? Lots of stuff going on there. If you want to find the schedule events, just give him a call. You got his number. So just go for it. Now, with that said, I'm your moderator for the evening, Alex Sharpe. Graduated from Applied Physics Lab in 95. I don't like admitting that, but yes, I graduated in, last century. Very proud alumni. And I'm joined tonight with, three of my colleagues. Let me give you an introduction on me real quick, and then I'll let each of them, give you a quick 30 seconds on themselves. So I started out as an engineer working for the government, ended up in the cybersecurity space doing and end up doing a lot of artificial intelligence along the way. Went into management consulting, did a lot of business strategy, a lot of process improvement, built a couple of business units at existing firms, built a couple of startups. Long story short, a few years ago, I pulled back to just being me. And a lot of my work these days is around cybersecurity and artificial intelligence. And I just love emerging technology, history, and all of that. So this is just a really groovy kind of thing to do. Uh, Bill Kirst, why don't you give us a quick 30 seconds on you?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Alex. Great to be here. Happy Towel Day, everyone. I got my towel day with my Hopkins colors. Class of 2000, Arts and Sciences. Um, I currently work at Adobe, where I lead change management, a lot of things around AI. Prior to that, I was at Microsoft for about a year and a half, also leading a lot of change around AI. Prior to that, I was in consulting for about 2 decades. So I've always led the people side of change and the intersection of technology. I was also an Army captain for about 12 years in the US Army Reserve and specialized in cybersecurity as well. So excited to be here for this special day. And thanks for the opportunity to present. I'll hand it over to Kate.
Sure. Hi, I'm Kate, and I'm a digital strategy consultant, class of 95, arts and sciences. So also previous decade, if you will, Alex, pointing at you. I have over 20 years of experience leading growth and driving digital transformation, both as an operator working mostly in digital media, and as well as the last 8 to 10 years as a consultant. A big theme of my career has been around making technology accessible and how it can help improve everyday living. So I'm especially excited to be here for this program and just happy to be chatting with these guys again. Always a fun time.
Always a fun time. F, do you want to?
Yes, hi. My name is Efrem Epstein. You can call me F. I'm class of 1990, and yes, I have my towel with my name on it here with us tonight. Um, yeah, um, as much as I love technology, I don't know anywhere near as much about technology and science as the other people here. What I do think I know is people. And this whole group started together because I was speaking with Bill about digital transformation, and we met virtually because of our shared interests. And then I met Alex, and I said, "Whoa, I'm talking to two different Hopkins alums who both are in digital transformation." Then we met a few other people that were in digital transformation. So we connected the group together. And I pride myself in being a connector because when you're a connector, you get to then talk with people who are much smarter than you, which is what's happening for me tonight. And the other tidbit I'll give is that I'm probably the only person that you'll ever meet that was both been a chief marketing officer and passed 4 actuarial exams. And I think I said I'm Hopkins class of 1990. And so I just went down for my 35th reunion. And while there, that was the first time Bill and I have now been virtual friends for 5-ish years, but we finally met in person, got to hug in person. And I think that that's one of the themes of this book is that, technology enables a lot, gives us a lot of shiny things, but it's no replacement for humanity and human connection. At least maybe I've just given away my that I've given away my punchline ahead of time, but we'll see how this conversation progresses.
All right, very, very cool. Thanks, everybody. So I probably should have said I have my towel with my name on it as well. And one of the reasons I brought this towel is because if you look closely, it looks like it's been around the galaxy a couple of times. All right. I also brought my Pangala Pangalactic Gargle Blaster. For those into the book, know what I'm talking about. So I hope everybody in the audience has done something similar to kind of enjoy and celebrate a little and just kind of cherish the moment. So,
Yes,
Bill,
sir.
why don't you get us started on, for the less fortunate in the crowd that haven't necessarily read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, why don't you jump in and kind of lay the foundation and kind of get us started that way?
Sure. Would you like me to kind of give a little synopsis or maybe a little poetry? What are you feeling, Alex? How would you
Um,
like us to get started?
let's do the poetry a little later. Now,
Okay.
anybody who's watched the multiple years will quickly understand that there's a reference in there. Bill has this habit of bringing his poetry. Now, the other thing that often happens with this is, and I should comment on this, I can tell he's got a new apartment because the other problem we've had is the other apartment had a lot of glare and that caused us some problems.
Yes.
The other one is whatever the theme is, and I'm kind of looking forward to this. He has a way of sneaking in messages. So, like when we did Star Wars, he would say things like, "This is not the audience you're looking for," right? It was
Yes.
just kind of crazy the way he did it. So, why don't you start us off on the book for, like I
Sure.
said, the less fortunate who haven't had the time to read it, and hopefully will go out and buy a couple of copies.
Absolutely. So, for those that have not had the opportunity to read the book, I encourage you to do so. I actually just did a rereading of the book, which I had not really read since probably about high school or college timeframe. And I was fascinated by a couple of things. One, it was written and published in 1979.
Yep.
And as I read the book, I found how powerful it was that in 1979, the author, apparently who was a little inebriated in a field in Innsbruck, and the idea came to him, in some ways, I feel like he was predicting the future. So the concept of the book revolves around a main character, Arthur Dent, who we get to meet when he is essentially at his house. And there is a series of construction people outside who are going to essentially demolition his house to put a highway through. And he is protesting and saying, you cannot demolish my house. But as we know, and as we feel with AI as an example, the world is changing all around us way too fast. And sometimes we want to be the ones who literally lie in front of our house and prevent the demolition from happening, but we cannot do that. So there's this adventure that Arthur Dent tries to stop change from happening and essentially gets taken on an incredible adventure with who he believes is a neighbor, but is actually an alien that's been visiting the Earth for quite a while and studying us. And he becomes the one human who is essentially taken off the Earth while watching the Earth essentially get demolished in itself. And so begins a glorious adventure across the galaxy. And while he does that, he comes across this book that his neighbor slash this alien friend has told him about, called The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which essentially has all the answers in it, and it changes its context and answers based on the questions you ask, which is kind of apropos because AI, like that, changes the answers based on the questions we ask. And since we talked last year on a session like this, so much has changed in a year. And so when I reread this book, I felt like what a gift it was to sort of read it through the lens of what we're going through now, which
Yeah.
I definitely did not have an appreciation for when I was in high school and college. And I'm imagining that a lot of people who take the opportunity to reread it will see a lot of the analogies, the metaphors, and a lot of the irony that exists in this book of things that we could learn about ourselves. So, at a high level, that's how I would describe it. Alex, what else would you add?
I think you hit it. I think you hit a lot of the key messages. And I don't want to do a spoiler just yet. We'll do that and we'll go back to Vogon poetry in a second. Let me tee that up a little. So with the book written by Douglas Adams is actually a five-part trilogy. It was originally released as a four-part trilogy. Then he wrote a fifth, and then the sixth book was actually written after his death. So if four-part trilogy doesn't get you enough, that's expanded to five, and then the sixth book written by somebody else. It's just a thing there, right? Um, I think the thing that always strikes me about this book, and it's incredibly applicable today. Bill, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of meaningful satire in there, and it makes us look at things from a different perspective in a different way. In a lot of ways, it's almost like it takes things to an extreme that it's like a warning cautionary tale in a non-threatening kind of way. It's just kind of funny. So with that said, rumor has it that Bill wrote some Vogon poetry. Now,
Yeah,
let me tee that up a little for those of you who have not been fortunate enough to read the book. Vogon poetry is the third worst poetry in the galaxy. It's horrible. It's designed to be horrible. I suspect Bill went out of his way to make sure it meets its hype. The second worst is Another Planet in the Galaxy, where the last time somebody read it, I believe it was their liver jumped out of the body and choked them to save the world. And the absolute worst poetry in the galaxy was from one of Douglas Adams' neighbors, where the one of the only good things about the Earth being destroyed in the book was that the poetry is no longer around. So, with that said, Bill, the floor is yours.
thank you. So this is poetry that I partially wrote, and I had a little help from our friends within ChatGPT. So this is titled Ode to the Algorithmic Abyss. Grungalax throbble through silicon's spleens, where thought thickets tick in recursive routines. Zaphod's eyebrow once twitched at this fate. Now deep thought is trending and curates your plate. Binaric dreams slither down data stream drains, while bureaucrat bots file your soul in domains. Oh, how the florbulent thrones of AI delight at rewriting our past with predictive foresight. A guide once said, "Don't panic," quite bold. Now Siri recites it in monotone cold. We outsourced our minds to devices that pout and hitchhiked to nowhere through updates and doubt.
Oh, that's kind of unsettling. It almost sounds like the 12 Days of Christmas gone bad.
Yeah,
Ah,
probably has the same,
it
yeah,
has
has the
that
same
kind of
tenure to it.
tempo. Has that
Yeah,
kind of tempo to it. By the way, we got a thing in the chat here. Lisa is absolutely correct. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy actually started out as a radio show before it turned into a book. So I think the message here is get drunk in the field, do a radio show, write a book, become famous, have a day named after you. Right? I think
absolutely.
How
that's
he
the thing.
rolls. That's how
I'm
Douglas Adam rolled.
Go ahead, Kate. Why don't you dive in?
Oh no, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's a really funny story. It is a fun story. I remember reading just a little blurb about that too, where he's like laying back in the field. And I think he had had this whole journey of trying to be, I don't remember if he was trying to be an actor or a writer, and he was struggling to break into things. And but yeah, just being open and staring up at the sky. I love that. I think it's just really something. He was traveling around Europe and he just applied it up there.
So inspiration comes from many different directions. it doesn't matter where your journey, you can never predict where your journey is going to take you as long as you're on the journey.
And it comes from innovation comes from, I don't know if you call it adversity in his, but challenge and struggle a little bit because he was broke.
There's
He
got to be some friction, right?
got to be some friction that spurs innovation.
All right. Well, let me tell you what I did, and it's interesting that both Bill and I turned um, turned to our AI on the web friends to do some stuff. So what I did is I asked one of the AI tools, trying not to give an advertisement here, said, "What's the relationship of AI in the book Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy?" And it listed four things. So I'm going to throw them out and then kind of ask my colleagues to comment on them, and we'll throw some, yeah, we'll get some things going, get it moving. Um, One is the overall, which I think is interesting. Let's see who goes there. Deep thought was asked the ultimate question, right? And if everybody remembers the book, the answer was wrong. Kind of reminds you some stuff. Then they built the Earth as the massive computer, and AI and human skepticism. Then obviously don't panic. So anything resonating in there?
There's a lot that resonates, I think.
You know which one? Which
Yeah.
Pick something. Pick something. We
That's
have
the question.
we
What's
have
the question
43
asked?
minutes.
It's
All right.
For,
Let's start with let's start with the broad strokes, right? I highlighted a few things in here that really resonated with me. One was highlighting the complexity of AI, the importance of asking the right questions, potentials for both wonder and absurdity. I thought that was great. And then, facing advanced technology. And by the way, Bill, Tony loves your poetry. He says too good for Vogue on poetry.
I
So
agree.
it really is. It really is. Maybe Tony will go out and work on his own and share some with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Efrem, looked like you were going to start
uh,
with something to
yeah.
jump in with.
Yeah, I'm not sure where to start here, but you mentioned about the computer, deep thought. It really, as Bill said, the question was, as you said, the question was wrong. Really, in the end, this is supposed to be how many years in the future, after so much more technology, it's still, we only get out of it what we put in. And AI, at least in this vision, is still only as good as its human inputs. And it can be,
Excellent point.
what'd you say?
Excellent point.
It's only as
Excellent
good
point.
it's only as good as human inputs. And I think, Bill, the title of your poem was something about algorithms, right? The algorithmic.
Yes,
I think
abyss.
that's something I keep coming back to when you're when I'm speaking, when I'm talking about AI, is that AI in the end is an algorithm. And it can be the best algorithm in the world. It's still an algorithm. And my guess, maybe I'm wrong, I can't predict the future, it still will always be an algorithm. It may be an incredible algorithm. What I think makes humanity humanity is that we're more than algorithms. I often say one thing AI can't do is it can't speak from the heart because it doesn't have one. Maybe it can have something to mimic a brain, but we're more than just brains. We're also heart, we have hearts and we have central nervous systems. And that's maybe also why Ford wasn't so good at sarcasm. Um, Mimic the brain. Maybe
Well,
don't.
you mean Ford, the character,
Yeah,
not
yeah,
not
yeah, yeah,
Ford,
yeah, yeah.
the
Okay,
automobile.
I'm sorry. I'm conflating aliens and computers, but still, that was seen as something beyond humanity. So maybe I'm sorry. You're right. I'm conflating there, but yes, beyond that. So
Yeah, I think for me, the thing that really resonates is this concept of don't panic, but there's also the element of pay attention. So don't panic and pay attention. Um, I think rereading this book for me has been more than a nudge to say, look around, like pay attention to what is happening. Similar to what Efrem is saying, it's not just paying attention to what is outward, but also what is inward. So pay attention to what is coming up in you. Um, even if we think about, like Kate, you were saying, and Alex, you were saying, where this story came from for the author, right? It came from inspiration, it came from imagination, it came from, and some people might say, a place of despair. I think all of those emotions we need to pay attention to. If we don't, we risk losing ourselves. There are a lot of articles now about how people are turning to this technology to be their coach, to be their therapist, to be their friend. And I think we've talked about this before, but one thing that these AI tools will never do is truly tell you you're wrong. They might find a way to challenge your thinking, but it's almost in their nature to make you feel like you are not alone, to agree with you in some way, as to create community. And that is where it leaves me a little bit apprehensive, because as Efrem is saying, community, I believe, really only comes from humanity to humanity. There may be tools in between, but never to replace.
That's a very interesting thought. It's a very interesting thought. I keep going back to the whole thing about deep thought. After working on the question for 7.5 million years, it comes up with the answer is 42. But by that time, they forgot the question, which we would now call a prompt. And it's
Yes.
like, I don't remember,
Yeah.
right? So they had to build the earth to figure out the ultimate question.
And
I,
they destroyed the earth. So,
well,
right. So that's what I keep thinking about is like the costs of it. So not that we need to blow up the earth in order to like have, interstellar travel. Hopefully that's not the case, like in the book, um, but there are costs to what we build and what we have. And, some of the costs that kind of just quickly jumped to mind was like all this bureaucratic interstellar stuff that was going on that led to these, archaic or rules or things that were buried, information that was buried deep, so that the Earth people on Earth didn't know that they were about to be destroyed. And that's like a cautionary tale about probably like too much bureaucracy or maybe overregulation in some ways. But then at the same time, in order to survive and in order for things to keep moving forward, for technology to keep advancing, they blew up the earth. And so there are costs to technological advancements, and we need to be aware. And as Bill was saying, pay attention. Maybe don't panic, but pay attention and yeah, be reminded of our humanity.
now on the other side of that, is there also a warning to don't oversimplify complex issues?
Oh, absolutely. Oh,
Isn't
yeah.
that part of what we're saying here?
Yeah, I think that was the biggest problem with the like not knowing what the right question is to ask. And that's one of the biggest challenges with AI, at least today, is that it can't really deal with nuance or complex questions. And if you don't really know what you're asking it, then it doesn't really know what to give you back. And so it just keeps giving you stuff back, right? And in various permutations of the same thing over and over again. And this is where I start my day with hope, but in the middle of the day, I'm like pulling my hair out because I keep asking, I keep thinking, oh, it's going to help me do my work better, faster. And by the middle of the day, I'm just like, I can only ask it but 20, 20 times the same
Yeah.
variations of the same question.
Y-
So,
You know,
yeah.
yeah, and some of it is kind of funny. A friend of mine at the gym, for some reason, the gym is a wealth of strange little anecdotal stories. I'm not exactly sure why. But of course, AI is everywhere, right? And everybody's on their phone and all this. Um, One person was using AI to create images, and they would regularly laugh about the images. Oh, look, this cat has a leg coming out of its head. Oh, this dog only has three legs, right? All these crazy things. The head is turned the wrong way, all that kind of stuff. And the next thing I know, they are uploading their medical information and they're asking for a diagnosis. It's like, wait a minute. You're busting on this thing to create images and it's getting the images wrong, but you have enough faith that it's going to make a medical decision for you? Yeah.
And
So,
what, yeah, and what does it do to the model, right? That's a great example to your point,
perfect.
Alex, right? Is like, I hear people saying things like, imagine if we are training something, and to your point early on, people said, oh, let's test the bounds of this. Let's try and take something that would never appear on this thing and put it on there and see how it renders, right?
Yep.
And it was really interesting to see people test those guardrails, but those become part of the model. So then you ask the question, okay, if we've taken, you know, parts of the world that don't necessarily belong together, we've fused them or morphed them for entertainment purposes in some cases, not just creative purposes, but entertainment purposes. What then might happen if that model that's learning on what we've input to it then takes medical diagnoses? Now, we hope it would not return things that are so far off base, but we have just inserted and taught it in many different ways for entertainment, and then we expect it to be informative. These are some interesting things that I think we're still dancing with.
Now, do you think that, and throw it out to the three of you. uh, Do you think one of the dichotomies is on one hand, humans look at technology very suspiciously, but at the same time will overtrust it?
Oh, yes, I think that's human nature. Yeah, I think that is an exact example of, or a perfect example of what it means to be human, is we're full of contradictions and contradictory ideas, and we can add context, we can take away context, we can change all the way we look at it, our point of view. And that distinguishes, it makes us crazy, but it also distinguishes us from AI, right? So it is something, yes, I think it's very human.
So was the point that we just accept that's the way it is, and those of us in this field just kind of have to accept that and navigate it? Um, everybody on this Zoom, this panel, has experience dealing with emerging technology and the transformations it causes people to go through. So do we just accept that as fact and deal
It's
with it? How do we deal with it?
it's interesting. There was an article, I'm not sure if anyone saw it this morning, it happened to pop up from the Wall Street Journal. And it was basically, I think that the headline was something like the AI experience is going from 51st states to Cheers, which is a fun, very fun headline. And it's written with a very light, and the person who wrote it basically was going for a lot of virality because that's a very fun headline. And I think there was a cool picture in there. What does that mean? What it was probably saying is that the chatbot that chatbots now are getting better at remembering your name. I get it, where everybody knows your name as opposed to 51st dates where she's constantly forgetting who the person who her lover was the day before, as opposed to Cheers where everybody knows your name. And that was its funny way of basically saying that chatbots are better at recognizing immediately who you are based on very little information. And the first part of the article was how great that is, how fun, very warm, and it waited until it got to about two-thirds through the article before saying, well, some people might not like that. Some people might find it creepy that a chatbot that they've never interacted with before, a certain site already knows who they are, partially because then that means that the site automatically knows who they are. And I think we know that a lot of this is going on, but we're using, I think the phrase a bunch of us were struggling with is cognitive dissonance. We always use cognitive dissonance. That's what humanity, I think that's what Kate was referring to. We as humans have cognitive dissonance. We do it in many things. And I think for a lot of technology, we're using cognitive dissonance to basically use things in the way we want to without worrying too much about the worst case scenario. At the same time, if we always worried about the worst case scenario for anything, if we always panicked, then see what I did there. If we always panicked, then we probably would never do anything. We'd probably not just never leave our apartment, but we'd never go online at all. And that's not good either. So we got to find the balance, and the balance will be different for each of us.
That's a really interesting point on Cheers. And was it George Wendt, the actor who played Norm, just
Yeah.
Hmm.
passed away? So,
Uh,
a little shout out to him. I've often wondered if there should be a Norm from Cheers sarcasm generator, right?
Hmm.
He had some really good ones. How'd your day go? It's a dog eat dog world, and I'm wearing milk bone shorts, right? So there's some really good stuff in there. Now, there's a few things in the chat I do want to call out because I think they're very interesting points. Now, first of all, a couple of people, Lisa, Debbie, Tony, all talked about the relationship with Douglas Adams to Monty Python, Doctor Who. I didn't know the Doctor Who thing. Thank you for that. And how Douglas Adams was actually a TV writer. So thank you for that. I think that's great trivia. That's really good stuff. Tony points out that the Hitchhiker's Guide, we should have picked up on this. Bill, you and I should like smack ourselves for missing this. The Hitchhiker's Guide itself was a talking book,
Yes.
right? We didn't bring that up. That's a very important point. So thank you, Tony, for bringing it up. Cindy, to your comment, has a question for you. Well, I'm going to start it with you, and then we're going to go around the horn.
Sure.
Should there be a fun GPT and a serious GPT?
It's a great question, and it kind of picks up where you left off with regard to Norm, right? And the milk bone shorts. Um, you know, to the point that Efrem made, the context, the memory in context, contextual learning that these tools are doing, there are some people that actually enjoy the intersection of the fun and the serious. But we've never been here before, so we don't know what is to come back to us. We don't know where that threshold lies. And I do wonder if there are opportunities for people to segment those out. But I'm not going to go into a Severance example too much here, but I just finished season 1 of Severance, and we talk about segmenting off our personal life and our work life.
When you're ready, we'll talk about season 2.
Okay, I'll
You're
make sure
ready.
to follow up with you about that. But it does bring up the question, are we getting to a place where we are forgetting who we are because we are putting so much of who we are into these technologies, which goes to Barbara's point around, can it be depressed? I mean, we'll talk about Marvin, the paranoid android, but I don't think it's lost on me that the android was the one that was having existential doom in this book. It wasn't the humans per se, it was the android that was experiencing existential doom. And I think if we're not careful, we will forget the feeling of existential doom. And that's a dangerous thing, to be human and not carry that to some degree. Don't think we should lead with it, but it reminds us of who we are and what we're hoping for. So I'll let others jump in because I know I packed a few things in there.
It's interesting you bring up that we may forget what doom is, and that would be sad for humanity. An album or a CD that got played a lot in my suite when I was at Hopkins is, if people remember the band Emerson, Lake and Palmer. This album actually came out in 1973, but even though that was about 15, 16 years before I went to college. And the album was called Carnival 9. And I'm sorry, it was called Brain Salad Surgery, but the song I'm thinking was Carnival 9, which is a um, very gloomy vision of the future, and not gonna give too much away, but the end, it's human versus a robot. But when they're setting up the future, one of the things they say in there is that, well, look at this, we have some actual tears for you to see from a museum, misery, misery. The idea that it's actually a sad thing that there's no real emotion anymore. And so building on that, I think this is a theme, that the fact that, you know what, part of what makes the world beautiful is that we can appreciate the whole range of emotions, and we can react to the whole range of emotions, even sadness. And I think that is an important part. And I think it's an important part of what of what Douglas Adams wrote, and what things like that in the category, basically exploring that basically ideally we want the full range of emotions.
So, Kate, I see your wheels turning.
Yes. You can see that through the are our neural networks talking to each other right now?
Well, these are augmented reality glasses. They just don't, they're the super thin version.
Yeah, it's so funny because I was just reading again about how ChatGPT had a rollback, and I'm going to get the model wrong. It was 4 point something recently, and they rolled it back a little bit because it was too much flattery. It was like pandering to people left and right. And it was telling people, like, no matter what they said, like, I have a business idea about this. And it was the most off the wall stuff. And chat came back saying, great idea. This is terrific. And here's how you can do it. And da da da, you're brilliant. Da, da. And it kept doing this over and over again, no matter what. It was just had this really pandering attitude. So I mentioned that because it might have been Barbara who asked, or Cindy who asked, can AI or be depressed like the Android? And so yeah, I think it can be. If you are going in, and it remembers you and it starts to say, hey, this is kind of the tone this person likes, or this is what they're responding to. If you're coming off in that way and it's responding to you in that way, it starts building on itself and it will keep doing more of that. And so does that become self-reinforcing? I think it certainly has potential. And then the opposite is true as well, which is like, instead of being depressed, it's like too much flattery and it can build you up way too much and take you away from reality. So there are lots of, I think we want the whole range of emotions, but we also need to be really careful about the extremes.
It's interesting when you were talking, Kate. It reminds me of uh, an episode of The Twilight Zone where this really bad guy ends up dying. He thinks he's in heaven. So I just gave away the ending. He thinks he's in heaven. Everything's going his way. Everybody's complimenting him. He gets everything he wants. He wins. He constantly wins when he gambles and all that. And then he eventually goes to who he thinks is God and said, "Send me to the other place." And they said, "What other place?" Hell. I said, "Excuse me, you're in hell." Right? If everything goes your way and you don't get any of that kind of feedback or that interaction or that friction or whatever words we want to use, we really do start to lose our edge and our humanness, and it's not as much fun as we think it is. Now, with that said, I think we would all pick something that we really, really enjoy and we're willing to, like chocolate, eclairs. You pick something. I'm sure we're very willing to push that envelope to some point, right? But there's going to come a point you can't live that way. So, Ganesh, let me see if Garish, I'm sorry. Um, Print is really small here. So he's talking about AI training, and this is a very important thing. It reminds me of the lost libraries of Alexandria. Now, there's an old reference for you. Learning from what is on AI models are largely being trained from what's online, right? And I say largely because there are some private databases and all that are not online, but digital files. What about old textbooks, videos, music? Um, are we going to lose anything? What do we do about that, right? Is the hard copy going to go away someday and we've totally lost it forever because we're so focused on digital? Right? The lost libraries of Alexandria.
I think it's a really well-timed question, because one of the things I'm seeing in the world that I work in has to do with provenance or
Oh, yeah.
content credentials, right? So those who have heard about provenance and content credentials, we're now in this space where, for example, the technology that we're using automatically has imprint data on it to show you whether it was made with generative AI or it wasn't. Has it been altered or not? Now that's pretty straightforward. But what we're noticing now is cameras, actual physical hardware, is now being made with that feature in it, so that in a world that we're probably rushing head into, is there's going to be more things that are created that are not real than things that we see every day that are real. And so we're now starting to see almost the reverse of this provenance, which is, rather than tell people, hey, this was made with AI, people are indexing on, please give me the opportunity to imprint something on there that say, this was touched by human hands. This was looked at with human eyeballs. this was crafted in an actual notebook. I mean, I don't necessarily think we're going to get back to the cave dwellings, but there's something to be said about, you know, standing in the presence of art that was made by human hands. And I find it fascinating that tension is there. And last thing I'll say here with regard to the context modeling piece, I know that the tension exists for me where people say things like, what would you do with your old diaries and journals? Do you digitize them? Do you let those things come into shape your own small context, your small language model, right? Different than what everybody else can have. But for memory's sake, right? As you age, as you get older, would you like to be able to query your own writings, your own journal writings, your own creations? Possibly, but it's a question that I think all of us are trying to figure out. How do we not lose those things, and how do we not lose ourselves in these things?
I don't pretend to predict the future. None of us can, obviously. But what I find very interesting is that a lot of futurism is basically assuming that we go very linear. And we've seen many times, many times in my lifetime that we haven't. I think it was 2023 was, I think, the first time in 30 some odd years that vinyl outsold CDs. Now, part is that no one's buying CDs at all anymore, but still, vinyl has made something of a
By the
comeback.
way, if anybody wants any CDs, I've got boxes of them I've been cleaning out. So if anybody
Vinyl, I would
wants
take.
it, you know, we'll talk. We'll talk.
But vinyl, I would take, or also taking something from, it was when I was in college that a cappella was getting a renaissance, and that was right when basically techno was basically having its heyday, but a cappella, the music that you could basically make 200 years beforehand, was having its basically we don't necessarily go linear.
Well,
So you never know.
it's like if Gregorian chants were a cover band.
Sure, but on the larger thing is that a lot of futurism is assuming that we constantly are building on things, but we do have the human taste to go backwards. And one of my favorite parts of the book was there were a few times where I saw where I saw technology that was being more disruptive than people intended. And the example was with the radio, with the radio that was they were trying to do with remote control, and they were finding that it was so hard to basically get it exactly what they wanted it to, where if it had it said, I think it said it had no longer had the buttons and knobs, where if it just had the buttons and knobs, the old school, it would have been great. But because it was, well, waving our hand, and I saw so much relevance to that to my modern life, where people try to build something with shinier technology, but you know what, just give me the old school thing and it'll be better for me.
Now with the buttons and knobs, did it go to 11?
The buttons and knobs in the book. I mean, oh, you're making a Spinal
No,
Tap
no,
reference.
Bill, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I couldn't pass that up, right? It's got to go to 11. So Cindy had a follow-up here. I should have gotten it a minute ago, but you know, things happen. All right. Also incorporating its own answers, right? So we were talking about journals and all kinds of different formats and stuff. You know, the models taking their own answers and digesting them and kind of spitting them back out. Right? It, that's an interesting point, Cindy, because that's something that kind of gets talked about like as an aside, but probably doesn't get enough attention. You know, it's kind of like, you know, we talk about social media forming an echo chamber, you know,
Yeah.
having models forming their own echo chambers with themselves, or putting two models together and they create their own language.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, Kate, I think about one of the things that you said specifically with regard to this, which this question that comes up. You know, these these things at their core are pattern-seeking devices. And if we step back and we remember in our own human experience, our human brains are essentially pattern-seeking devices, right? If not slowed down or mindful or given these techniques and tools, we will do this. I mean, if any of you have taken that sort of test or seen that thing pop up on social media where maybe the third letter of every word is altered, but you can sort of quickly scan over it and read it, because what's happening is your brain is filling in the gaps, right, based on the patterns that we know. And I think where this does get dangerous, to Cindy's question, is these pattern seeking devices are essentially algorithmic models, which will say the next logical answer or input or character or pattern is this, until what Efrem says comes to play, which is life is not linear. And what happens when? So I don't know, Kate, like I would love your thoughts on this, because it sits with me that if we don't do some of this ourselves, it will be, again, not to be Marvin the paranoid android, it'll be too late.
Yeah, I mean, I do, you know, I came into this conversation wanting to be hopeful and and wanting to be I really tried. I really did. I prepared myself ahead of time. I thought about lots of hopeful things. I read lots of hopeful things about the potential and opportunity for AI. And I do believe there are lots of great things that are happening now and that are going to be happening. There's a lot to look forward to. I'm especially excited about some of the stuff in science and medicine in particular. I was just reading again about how just even within Parkinson's disease, there's a device, deep brain stimulation, and they're now using AI. It's an adaptive device, and I mean, the advancements that have been made in this thing in just the last 20 years are just tremendous, and it offers such hope to people. And I think it's realistic hope. It's not, something that's completely far off for many people. At the same time, I see something like Cindy's question, and is ChatGPT also incorporating its own answers into its knowledge base? And I think of, I see this happening in the workplace, where things are getting generated and in the name of productivity, and look how fast, because generative AI can do these certain things really well. And one of the things it does really well is if you say, sound like a McKinsey management consultant, use the technology, give me a strategy, da da da, it will spit something out and it will sound like a McKinsey consultant that you paid a lot of money for. But the reality is, once you start reading and see beneath the veneer, some of it's just not right. It's just not getting things quite right. And then that's once it gets into your internal knowledge base at work with whatever you're working on, it then gets replicated out and it becomes really hard and insidious and so that's where I start, some of my less optimistic feelings, I guess, about this, less hopeful feelings are when I encounter this kind of thing, and I do feel like it makes us a little less smart every day in some ways. And so, I do have a fear that we are already becoming reliant on a technology that is so early, it's in such infancy stages, and things have been rolled out so quickly, and we just don't know what we don't know, and yet we become reliant on it. And it's, you know, I encounter these challenges, and it does make me go, I'm not sure how I feel about this.
Interesting. Listening to this, I'm going back to a couple of quotes in the book, right? Trying to stay on point, right? The Hitchhiker's Guide, calm letters, don't panic.
Don't panic.
First thing that comes to mind.
I've got my towel somewhere.
That's your towel. Just hold on to your towel. That's all you need. The other one is in the book, it talks about time is an illusion.
Hmm.
Time is an illusion, which goes back to F's thing about being linear, nonlinear. It's really not. And oh, by the way, one of the things picked up on that I totally forgot about. We're holding this on a Thursday, and in the book, the one character says, "I never got the concept of Thursdays." Right, so it's very timely. But the last thing to throw out, which reminded me of when Kate was talking, there's a scene, because you remember they have the improbability drive and strange things happen. At one point with the improbability drive, a blue whale appears, right? Remember what the blue whale says? Oh no, not again. Right? So this is an improbable thing that's probably happened more than once.
And it gets conjured up out of nowhere, right?
It's
And,
conjured up out of
it's,
nowhere.
and then
Ex-
it's like, what am I doing here? So it has an existential crisis.
Yep,
And
yep, yep, yep.
so,
Um,
yeah.
cool.
Make this
So,
make this very meta for a second about improbability, because I find that in my life there are often all these weird coincidences pop up that I often say, I'm wondering if there's an improbability drive that's surrounding me. And one of the things that I was thinking when I was reading the book is because I've always been way more into Back to the Future than Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And I was thinking about, how they handled time, because the Hitchhiker's Guide was written, what, 79, 80, 82 were the first three books, and the first Back to the Future was 85. So we're talking, these are out there. Well, and so I was thinking about that. And wouldn't you know it, cue the improbability drive. I was thinking about this all this week. Last night, if you watched Jeopardy, the final Jeopardy question was about Back to the Future. And I was thinking, okay, that is so meta. This all thing is on my mind right now. The panel's today. The panel is going to be tomorrow from last night. And watching the final Jeopardy question, I usually only watch Final Jeopardy for Jeopardy, was about Back to the Future. I'm like, okay, this is too weird.
all right. So what was the answer? Let's see if we can get the question.
Well, it had to do with the question was something like, it was like cars and movies, and it was like this type of car had to have a fake speedometer out there because it actually only went up to 85 miles an hour, and of course, it's talking about the DeLorean.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I mean, and I think all three contestants got it right. So
Yeah, so I see a question, if you know, I'll just jump in. That's
Go for it.
asking
You
if,
mean the one that starts with following up to Kate?
uh, yes.
Go for it. Go for it. It's clearly yours.
Yes, it does say that. If we're relying too much on AI in the early stage because businesses feel the need to be in the AI space, or basically they have FOMO, or are we drawn to it naturally, or are we being pushed to it by capitalism? And I would say all of the above. That might not be satisfying, but I think it is. I think there's a lot of fear of missing out. A lot of people feel like they need to be in it. And in my consulting work, I see like some extremes on this too. Like some people are going all in because they really are fearful. And then others are like hanging back a little too much and they're not taking advantage of some of the efficiencies that they could get. I mean, there's some really basic things that that could really help, um, uh, help, as companies are trying to grow and and transform and to be relevant, to maintain the relevancy. And so I think, there's a concern too about like if you're overly complacent, you may get left behind. But then if you're doing too much out of fear, you're going to overspend, or you may overinvest, or you may be doing the wrong thing or asking the wrong questions and building all this equipment and spending how many thousands or millions of years flying through space to try to figure out the answer or the right question. And you still don't get it. So yeah, I think there are lots of reasons why people are doing it. And so there is, well, it's advantageous to move quickly. It doesn't hurt to also take a slight beat and to say, hey, is this really the best thing for me or my business right now? Or what is it that I need to do and what tools are the best things? And then to find out what the tools are, but not necessarily to start with the answer. So there are lots of things in there, lots of reasons why people are embracing it so quickly. But I think there is a bit of a pullback, at least what I've seen. Not that the businesses I work with aren't still all in on AI, but they are being a little more cautious now because they're finding they're having to redo things, or that they've overinvested in one area and they really, need to shift their resources somewhere else. So yeah, it's a balancing act, I think. But in time of really rapid advancing technological change, where things are not happening linearly, we are learning as we go along.
Cool. So we have about 4 minutes, right? And one of the things I have to do is announce who won towels, right? So Hopkins had a lottery for towels for attendees because it's Towel Day. I don't know about you, but I'm thinking we should do a Mercedes Day because I'd like a car. But maybe we can Harley Davidson or something, but we can get there. So, couple things to throw out. Tony talks about um, having the model deciding what we see and not see. I think that's also very important. And then Tasso or Tassos, um, however, my apologies if I get it wrong, but I tried two things, so more than likely one of them is correct. Um, is looking at the intergenerational knowledge gap and talking about shortages of plumbers and electricians, um, going to university instead of skills. It's interesting about the brain is still developing. That he's actually got a very complex question in here. Um,
I'd
I'll leave it at that. Just kind of
yeah,
react.
I'd love to jump in for the complexity of it, right? Because I
Yep.
actually think it encapsulates kind of the beauty of the unstructure of the human experience. And a couple of things come to mind. One is when I see the aspects of people kind of over-indexing on any sort of modality or technology, one thing I'm always reminded of is we as humans, if we think about how knowledge was passed for millennia, we are of the oral tradition. We tell stories, right? And it's hearing knowledge from voice to voice or being shown, like to the point around skills and craft and the tactile experience. I do find it interesting that the brain develops differently when experiencing the tactile, when hearing the audio. We talked about music, the power of music that Efrem talked about. It's fascinating to see what happens to the brain when influenced in hearing music. The same thing happens when people are exposed to the opportunity to be bored, right? So the concept of boredom is something that feels pretty scarce nowadays because of, as Kate was saying, the FOMO, right? People are feeling that they're trying to catch up all the time. And I do think in some ways we are hearkening back to some of those things that seemed outdated or seemed a little bit extraneous. But in truth, we might actually find that we have more fidelity in who we are by doing those things and using these technologies. I think they become touchstones is what I would call them, right? If somebody says, "Hey, if you really want to feel something, go put your hands in the dirt, go put your feet on bare grass, go paint erratically, go do something that is so visceral and tactile, reminds you of the body that you're in, as opposed to maybe having your brain co-opted by something else." And last thing I'll say here is, if I recall correctly, the Hitchhiker's Guide itself, as this talking book, it changed its answers and its cover and its responses depending on who was holding it. So
Yeah.
that reminds us of exactly what we're talking about.
So, couple of things just real quick. We are running very short on time, and I just turned to 59 instead of 58, so we even have less time. First thing I want to say is we got some additional items in the chat. We have some additional dialogue. Brian Davis, I think he put his email in the chat. If there's other topics you want to discuss, please let us know. If you want a version two or part two of this, because we seem to have a lot of momentum, I'd say feel free to put that in there, and we'll see what we can do. We're having a lot of fun. It's kind of obvious. So if you're interested, I'm sure we could pull something together. Now, in just a few seconds, everybody give a closing remark because I have one other closing thing to do. And Brian, make sure your email is in the chat so people can respond to you. 10 seconds.
10 seconds. My favorite part of the book was when he's just about to meet the mice and he's told, I'll be in choice between being happy or right, I'll choose being happy any day. And I think
Perfect.
that's basically what my big thing here for this and AI.
Perfect. Thank you. Kate?
Yeah, it was at the very beginning. There's something about the dolphins and humans on Earth, and how the humans on Earth thought that, we think that we're really intelligent and smart, and but more evolved than everything, all the other animals, and the dolphins thought that they were, the ones that were really evolved, because they're the ones that are like floating around and enjoying the calm and peace. So I think it's kind of like a reminder, like, who's really in charge now? Is it us
Yep.
or AI?
Excellent. Bill?
For me, it'd probably be the beginning of the book, somewhere between when Arthur was lying in front of his house, pulled up out of the mud, and then brought to the bar. And he was there with Ford, and they were having a beer, and they kept saying to the bartender, "By the way, the world's going to end in this amount of minutes." And the bartender said, "Okay, would you like another beer?" And to me, one of the things I found really, really sort of calming was the sense of, even with that knowledge, there are people who have the ability to extend sort of calm, right? And create a moment and a memory. And in that moment, we have something that seems so minuscule, a bartender holding, keeping bar with people and patrons, and not adding to chaos. And I think every one of us, depending on our role and our job and our contributions, have an opportunity to instill calm, to extend compassion, and in some cases serve somebody one more drink before the end
Cool.
of the world.
All right. So, audience, thank you. We loved it. Questions are great. Send us suggestions for future talks if you want to do a part two of this. Sounds like we have a lot of data. Questions are still coming in. We could probably do that. I would say feel free to connect with any of us and all of us on LinkedIn. Do that. And one parting thought, so long, and thank you for all the fish.
Do we want to list the winners?
They already put it in the chat.
Got it. Okay.
Sorry about that. Congratulations on everyone who won a towel.